Hey everyone, welcome back to the BATTASS Podcast, the Batman the Animated Series Show podcast. I'm Clay McCormack, and with me is
Sean Murphy.
And we are talking about Batman the Animated Series. Today we're going to be doing two episodes. The episodes are P.O.V. and Forgotten. And I don't know. I mean, we may as well just jump right into it. In P.O.V., which we have a story by Mitch Bryan, teleplay by Sean Catherick Derrick and Lauren Bright, directed by Kevin Altieri, and in it, a botched police operation results in the suspension of those involved. Officer Wilkes, Officer Montoya, and Detective Bullock. Confronted by their superiors, each of them is forced to tell their tale of what happened that night. The episode is similar in structure to Akira Kurosawa's film Rashomon.
Yeah.
This, I feel like, is the first really good episode in the series. And I'm surprised it comes so early.
Yeah, it's funny because I know we're doing two today, and I was watching the second one, and I thought, wow, they really focused on POV being great.
Yeah, yes, they do.
But the way they commissioned these was they commissioned 3 seasons all at once, right?
I think so, yeah. The first season was like, I think, 60 episodes or something like that. So they were kind of working, I assume they were working on all of these kind of at the same time.
Right. But that's what I'd love to know is, did they have on some kind of whiteboard, here are the top 10 episodes, which we all really like. Let's focus on these.
Right.
And then they're like Heart of Ice. Did they know that POV was going to be great? Did they know that Robin's Reckoning was going to be great? Like, how did they manage to throw their resources into these episodes to make them great? And then the other episodes kind of faltered a bit. You know?
It's interesting. You can almost kind of tell as you're watching them that at some point, they must have realized, oh, okay, well, this one is POV is going to be a little bit different and a little bit more interesting and a little bit out there. So we should really put our back into this one.
Yeah.
It's like you can almost, I know it doesn't work this way because this stuff is all done months in advance or years in advance, but you can almost feel how excited they are about some of these episodes.
Right.
And this is one where I'd say you can feel that they're excited about what they're doing because, the animation in this is great.
Right. Well, so one thing that I think about is, I don't know where I remember reading or hearing this, was they had a handful of different animation studios that they would pull from. Some were more expensive than others because the really good ones were, obviously more expensive. And they would purposefully, so for example, there's some that involved a lot of Batmobile stuff.
Right.
So they would find a studio that was good with animating cars, and they would give it to that studio. And sometimes it seemed like they didn't have much money left, so they would give it to whoever, and they would get back whatever animation they could afford. So they must have known which scripts demanded the better animation houses,
Yeah, I can only assume that's the case because, I mean, that's one of the things about this episode and about, Heart of Ice and the other ones that are legit good is that you can tell, I mean, the scripts for these are very tight. This script is, I think the script is really good. I know there was longer stuff that they cut out with some flashbacks involving like Montoya as a child and Bullock as a child. And it's all very like peripheral character stuff that honestly is just a waste of time in this story. But they really trimmed it down, and it's really tight and it's really different, especially for, I mean, this is a kids cartoon on in the 90s that has multiple points of view telling the same story and also features an unreliable narration device, which is kind of unheard of.
It's crazy. I mean, if this show was made for 7-year-olds, then there must have been a lot of winking back and forth between the adults who knew that this was more of a young adult/adult story. You know what I mean? Right.
And the next one too, as much as I think we're going to have a different opinion about the next one than we do to this one. That one has stuff in it too that I'm shocked is in a kids cartoon, but we can talk about that when we get to it.
Yeah, you're right. Even the flops still have redeemable things that I think are interesting.
Yeah, but so I think I assume obviously we both like this. I think the multiple points of view thing is just so much fun. I love it every time a story does this because it allows really interesting storytelling devices. And I noticed that they do it a little bit differently than it's usually done, where it's usually multiple points of view of the same event, but each time you see the different person's point of view, it's slightly different in the actions you're being shown. So like what you're seeing is the literal presentation of what this person thinks has happened. But in this show, they're doing it almost kind of like you would in a comic, with a voiceover narration caption where the people are saying stuff. They're explaining what they saw in a hyperbolic fashion in the case of the younger cop, or in a straight up lying fashion as Bullock. But what we're seeing is the actual straightforward events, and I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, a lot of voiceover. I mean, voiceover is the thing you want to try to avoid, and I say this having used a lot of voiceovers when I deal with Batman. But if you can use a voiceover in a way where the storyteller is betraying the truth, or if he or she is enhancing the truth, or they're giving a spin verbally that's not depicted visually, I think that's the most interesting way to handle a voiceover, you know, when you can't trust the narrator. And in the case of Bullock, Bullock is a liar. I mean, in his own mind, I think he's just fudging the truth, and he's still a good cop, but technically he's lying.
Right. And, the stuff that they cut out, I think the reason that you can cut that stuff and not and have it be so clearly just like extra fat is that the device that they're using takes the place of any sort of character work you have to do outside of it, because what the cops are saying compared to what we're seeing is a absolutely perfect distillation of that character. So you've got Bullock stuff where you're seeing him, trying to be a glory hog and it's not working, but what he's talking about is very trying to cover his own ass, and you get a perfect idea of what Bullock is as a character. The younger cop, same thing, where he's a very wide-eyed rookie, and that comes through in his story, because he talks about Batman like this otherworldly being, and Montoya is straight down the middle,
Yeah, no, the young cop, I love that line, like, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's probably one of my top 10 favorite quotes in this series. It was unbelievable. And I think that, I didn't realize this, but Montoya was created for the animated series. And then 6 months before the animated series came out, they started releasing comics that included her.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Just a quick Wikipedia search. I think she was created by the series, and then DC, even before the shows started coming out, they started to work her in, which I would love to be at that meeting, honestly, because I know that Bullock already existed, and he was always kind of a cop that bent the rules, but to have like a lesbian Latino lady character, I mean, not so obvious at first, of course, but to really have that early on, and to know it was going to be valuable, and to go ahead and start putting it in the comic before the cartoon even came out, that's really impressive. I'd love to know how they came to that decision, and obviously I think it was the correct one.
Right, and I wonder if it was something that they had fleshed out at the beginning, or if it was more like a Harley Quinn kind of thing, where it's like we're gonna put her in, and then it worked, and they just kind of built it up from there,
Right.
I mean, she's very prominent in the comics now. I think she was actually the Question for a while as well.
Yeah, she was. I was also reading that in this series that they intended for her to have a backstory where her husband was a cop who was killed in the line of duty, and she's also a cop, obviously, and trying to make up for his murder or something.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I never knew. I mean, literally 10 minutes ago, I just read that, so it's amazing. And I'm not sure where the idea came to make her gay, but it might be a Rucka thing. I know our friend Tana is really into Montoya, and she's into Greg Rucka as a writer, so I'm sure we could ask her.
Yeah. She's a great addition too. I mean, she always ends up popping up right where you would need someone. She's a great foil for Bullock, because Bullock is. Yeah. You don't really get to see a lot of personality out of a lot of the cops in the show. Right. And I mean, that's just a matter of not having the space for all these characters. But, you've got Gordon, who is Commissioner Gordon. He's kind of his own thing. And then you've got Bullock, who is a very specific character. And then pretty much the rest of the cops are just kind of just cops, you know? And so to have Montoya there that really gives a face to the rest of the cops is really great.
Yeah. And I think this is her first big showcase where she's honest, she's forthright, she's earnest in how she describes the events. I don't think she's mad at Bullock, even though I think she expects him to embellish the truth a bit. But I think that they're probably partners and they probably have their disagreements, but it seems like they work together and they get along. I mean, I'm probably adding a lot more to it than what's there, but that was always the impression I got. Like you said, I mean, I like Bullock, but I think he's better with Montoya as his partner because she balances him out. You know,
I was thinking as I was watching this, because Bullock in this episode is painted pretty shitty.
Yeah.
And do you think Bullock is a good cop? Like overall, do you think he's a good cop?
Yeah, I don't know. I think sometimes probably. Do you think a good cop bends the rules sometimes?
Yeah, I mean,
is the question, you know?
Yeah, that's the thing. I've always liked him because I have a soft spot for characters like him who are who you know they're always going to end up doing the right thing in some form, but they are just gray enough that you don't exactly know what they're going to do, and it adds a little bit of edge and danger to them.
Right.
And I think Bullock fits in there perfectly because he's the kind of cop who's gonna do the right thing. You know, he hates Batman, but he kind of probably hates Batman because he kind of wants to be Batman.
Yeah.
You know, like Batman. Batman works outside of the law in a way that Bullock probably wishes he could.
Right.
And
exactly.
Do I think somewhere along the line Bullock maybe planted a glove somewhere? Wouldn't surprise me.
Right. Well, that's my thing. I think in fiction, Bullock is a good cop, but in real life, I would have Bullock fired.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's interesting that there's a difference in if you have a fictional heroes that bend the rules and it's okay. Like,
right.
You see Bullock bend the rules in the comic, and in the cartoon, and most of the outcomes from his lying are basically they don't have any repercussions.
Right.
But in real life, if he was a cop doing that shit, well, I'm sure he'd be doing that with basic traffic stops and, you know, pulling people over or like jaywalking. I mean, you can imagine the kind of paperwork or the lack of paperwork he would collect while he's doing his job. You know, I think he's an insurance liability. I think police force, if they had someone like Bullock in real life, should fire him. But in fiction, in Gotham, I like him.
Yeah, 100%. And it's, you know, it's something that I've touched on in a few different podcasts at this point with Wes and stuff, because it keeps popping up. And it's this interesting thing that in fiction, the best characters are usually the worst at their job. So like Bullock is not a good cop in the real world. He's a great character.
Right.
You know, Crockett and Tubbs in Miami Vice are terrible undercover cops. They are terrible undercover cops, but they're great for the show that they're in, you know? James Bond is a terrible spy. You know, he tells everybody his name. He's a terrible spy, but it works. You know, it's interesting how these things, you know, shake out differently. You know, Blade Runner, Deckard is not very good at his job.
Spoilers. Yeah, I agree. You know, it's funny. I had an argument with my editor once about Batman. I wrote this scene where Batman goes into a building and he gets people attack him, and there's like 30 people that gang up on him and kick his ass basically, and he's knocked unconscious. And my editor said, "This isn't believable. Batman wouldn't go into a building without knowing that there was danger, and if 30 people attacked him, Batman is capable of beating 30 people through, I don't know, tricks or being prepared or whatever."
Right.
And I disagree with him. I'm like, you think way more of Batman than I do. And he goes, what do you mean? And I say this having the reins to do whatever I want with Batman, obviously. But I said, you know what? I agree. But I think Batman's more interesting when he fucks up. I think he's more interesting when he breaks the law. I think it's more interesting when he goes in sure of himself and his ego gets him into trouble and he ends up getting knocked out or has to bullshit his way out somehow. I think readers are okay with that kind of Batman. I don't think that you want a Batman that is always 2 steps ahead of everybody. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
And I feel like my editor plays a lot of Arkham Asylum and isn't looking at Batman from a writer's standpoint. And I love Batman, but I think he's better when he's flawed and when he's kind of a fuck up and he charges in without thinking and he breaks the rules and doesn't answer and he gets in trouble later. I think that's much more fascinating. And I know that makes him more of a villain sometimes. But as an anti-hero, I think that's part of the requirement of making him interesting, to make him imperfect.
Well, that's sort of like, it's a sort of a distillation of the general first step in storytelling down to a very specific point, Right. Because usually the way stories work is there's a status quo, and then the story kicks off when the status quo changes, and the character has to deal with that change. Right. And on a very, boiled down specific to a character standpoint, what you're seeing is you've got Batman, who is a very specific kind of prepared character who then is put in a situation where that stuff doesn't work, so he has to do something differently. And that's always going to be interesting. That's what makes interesting stories.
Yeah.
That's why you end up having so many stories where it's like not necessarily to Batman, but like Superman loses his powers, or you're taking things away from these characters is forces them to think outside the box most of the time.
Right.
Yeah, that's why it always bums me. Not to go on a Superman rant, but that's why it always bums me out when Superman stories end with Superman just punching somebody harder than the other guy can punch him, because it's too easy to do that, and it's way more interesting to have Superman in a situation where punching isn't going to solve the problem. So then he has to outthink the situation, And the same with Batman, Batman can beat everybody up. Yeah, sure. He could have the Batwing come in and, shoot bombs and blow everything up, but when that stuff doesn't work, that's where the interesting stuff comes from.
Yeah. I think there's 2 kinds of people in comics. There's people that like Superman, and there's people that like the idea of Superman. Mm-hmm. And I think you and I are more of we like the idea of Superman, but it's really tricky to do a good Superman story. You know what I mean? That would
I would say I like the idea of Superman, but I also don't think that discounts the character, liking the character. Like, I think the idea of Superman can be applied correctly. Let's put it that way. Right. I don't know if it always is.
Yeah.
And I think when it is, it's fantastic. But when it's not, it's a little bit, it's kind of boring.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I haven't read every Superman, but I would imagine that 10% of Superman stories are actually would hold up, as far as in my opinion, reading them. I think there's a lot. It's easy to overdo the character and to just jump into it without thinking. And he's stopping a bank robbery. He's flying around the sun. It's really hard to figure out a way as a writer to handicap him in a way that still allows him to be powerful. He still learns a lesson by the end of the story.
Right.
But he's not all powerful, and he's not like a plot buster. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, unfortunately, Superman is not in this episode of Batman.
Yeah, I don't know why.
But who is equally as important is the faceless villain that they give us that you don't even actually see his face.
And you don't need it, though.
What's that?
You don't need it. He's a bad guy.
No, honestly, I was going to say, one of the last episodes that came before this is the Underdwellers, where it's got the sewer king, or that's the one that came directly before this. So it's the sewer king or whatever,
right?
Who's a shitty character. Like that's just not a good character. He's a one-off. You never see him again.
Yeah. And I feel like DC has other characters that are close enough that they could have just used without inventing a whole new guy that lives in the sewer with children.
Well, but in this case, I feel like they go completely the other way with that. So you've got a one-off character you're never going to see again, but instead of giving us an over-the-top Batman villain, they kind of keep him to the shadows, and that, I feel like it makes him way more interesting. Because I kind of want to know what his deal is, but I'm happy that they don't tell me,
Yeah, by not revealing him, it puts the focus on Bullock, Montoya, and whatever his name is.
Yep, 100%.
Officer Whitey Magoo or whatever. It was unbelievable.
And we do get some good henchmen, though. Like one of the henchmen is voiced by Ron Perlman, which is always fun.
Oh, yeah. They might have been testing him out before they put him on to Killer Croc or something.
Oh, yeah, maybe, yeah. what I really like about this episode, though, is I feel like I love the episodes where they're just such a good distillation of the Batman thing.
Yeah.
Where you see, like, it's like what Batman should be to a certain extent, where you're seeing it from the point of view of the people on the ground. And the only interactions with Batman that you're getting are like flashes and, glimpses of him through the shadows and the fire and everything. And it's just, I love that stuff where he doesn't talk. My number one least favorite thing in all of Batman media is when Batman hangs around to talk to people. It's my, like, I after the end of Justice League, like, Batman's just hanging around talking to people. It just drives me fucking nuts.
Yeah, because you think, like, okay, the accident is over, the fire is out, the flood is stopped, and you're sitting there looking at him as the sun comes up, and, you're noticing he hasn't shaved, and there's a scar on his cheek. Just, he's a little tired. He's got a limp in his right foot. I mean, how many times can you interview Batman after a giant disaster and not start to put together, Bruce Wayne kind of has that chin, I mean, the least he's seen, I think Batman is best when he was year one or in the first 5 years of his existence.
Yeah.
The more he works with cops, the more he tries to legitimize himself, the more he's on record or, gives any kind of testimony or evidence, or the more time he spends at Gotham City Police Department, the less compelling he is in a way, because you just start to sense that wouldn't they have figured out who this guy is by this point? Put a tracer on him, or I don't know, he's leaving DNA all over the city. And I know it's a comic and you're not supposed to ask those questions, but I definitely think about that stuff.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And I mean, it's just having him stick to the shadows is just more satisfying too. It just, I don't know. It lends itself better to the mythology and everything, and the look and all that kind of stuff. Speaking of the look, this episode has one of my favorite things, which is Batman lit entirely by fire.
Yeah.
Because it turns everything, like, it almost turns it black and white, but it's like this burnt umber and orange glow, and it just really it's just got a really unique look to it that I love.
I wonder, because in the Grey Ghost episode, it's similar, where a building's on fire and this city's all lit in red, and Batman peeks out of the alley, and it's just mostly black and white with orangish reds everywhere, and it looks fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if this is the same animation studio, because I both of these episodes were animated extremely well.
Yeah, I would put money on it probably being, because that episode does have great animation.
Yeah.
And that's such a good look. I feel like it feels, I think of Batman Year One every time I see that, because I feel like there's a lot of that kind of coloring in Batman Year One.
Yeah.
And it just it's always been a highlight for me.
Yeah. Do you this is a sort of part of a broader discussion, but do you like Batman working with the police, or do you like him as more of a phantom?
I think I like him somewhere in the middle. Like I don't mind when he works with Gordon and pushes them in the right direction and all that kind of stuff, but I don't really like when he's like a part of the team in the briefing room, basically. I think there's on the Venn diagram, their circles touch very gently, because I mean the whole thing with him is he's a vigilante. The fact that he works with the cops is supposed to be scandalous,
Exactly. Yeah. No, I get it, man. That was what my book was about, was how come no one's calling Batman on his shit? And I like Batman,
right?
But there's a lot to work with if you're any kind of a lawyer, or if you're someone who's angry like Jack Napier and you have some ability to sway public opinion. Like, Batman is begging to be taken down, especially in the way the modern times work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love Batman, and I don't always mean to attack him, but I feel like in the classic pulp Batman sense, it works that if he works with the cops every now and then. But because of modern technology, I think that when you look at him working with cops now, you're like, can't you put a tracer on that guy? Or what kind of DNA is he leaving? Or fingerprint? I mean, there's so many things that you could do to find out who he is at this point, that you can't really do that without thinking about the logistics anymore. At least not me.
And I mean, as much as I love the bat signal is kind of ridiculous. Like that.
Yeah, it's called a bat text message. Here's my phone. Text me when you need me.
Or
see you later.
Not even that. The fact that it's on top of the fucking police station.
Yeah.
Like you should be able. You could probably arrest Commissioner Gordon for that, couldn't you?
That was what I did in White Knight. Is what Joker says, you guys are implicit in all of Batman's crimes.
Yeah.
And Gordon's like, oh, well, he's not a cop. And Jack is like, bullshit. You have a fucking bat signal on the roof of Gotham City Police Department.
And it's even worse if he's not a cop. If he's not a cop, then you're actually actively being complicit in crime.
Yeah, like any first-year law student will be able to figure out how to take down Batman, Gordon, every one of these people.
Right.
And that's not that I don't love them, but I would like some of these questions answered.
But luckily, it's a work of fiction, and all of those rules don't apply. So, I guess we talked about the episode. We talked about it a little bit. I think we kind of covered the good stuff anyway.
We did, yeah. We spawned a lot. We love the episode.
Yeah.
But if there was a scene in it that you had to draw, what would you pick?
I would do an entire issue of Batman lit by only fire.
I knew. Call it Batman Fire.
Yeah. Man, that would be so awesome. It would be so great. It wouldn't actually affect my drawing at all, but I would have a lot of notes for the colorist.
Yeah. You wouldn't put on like a lot of below lighting. You wouldn't light them from different angles just to get the fire.
Yeah, I guess when you put it that way, yeah, it would, because it depending where the fire's coming from, and you could get a lot of interesting multi-source stuff going on. Which I always want to do that stuff, but it's such a pain in the ass because you really got to think it out.
Yeah, you got to take like 10 minutes out of your life to. I mean, if you've got the big panel on the page is Batman lit from both sides behind him. So you need a little bit of cheek on the right, you need to see his cheek on the left, and a little bit of reflective light in the middle. Like, you need to actually sit down and take a photograph to really get that correctly. And it's hard. Yeah, because you want to just plow through your page, Yeah,
the one that I love that I'm constantly trying to get is that George Zaffino or Jorge Zaffino like low light but kind of at an angle, so it like the shadow of the nose blacks out one of the eyes.
Yeah, but then you do a little bit of light on the eye itself.
Yes.
It's like this vampire glow.
Yes.
So Jorge Zaffino, because no one who's listening to this is going to know who that is. A South American artist. I think he died in 2004. He did some really great Punisher stuff called Kingdom Come Kingdom Gone and Assassin's Guild. Anyway, Jorge Zaffino, he's amazing. And I love how he used to draw these like angry faces, like alpha male screaming straight into the camera.
Oh yeah,
with like his lips back and his teeth just sticking out. Like he really did that well.
He did.
I bet in real life he just did that all the time.
He did the. I mean, if you ever want to see Conan the Barbarian, as I imagine Conan should look in like the ultimate Conan the Barbarian was drawn by Zaffino, and he's you could see his work. I mean, I'm heavily influenced by him. Sean, I know you are. He's the kind of artist where, if you mention it to an artist who knows him, they're going to go on at length about how much they love him. So
right, yeah. To me, he's like Toth, but he has an electric guitar.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Yeah,
some more edge, some more tooth on it, and he died way before his time. It's too bad. He never really got the proper accolades that I feel he deserves. But people who know their shit still talk about him, so that's good.
Yeah. What about what would you draw?
Oh man, the Batman in the Fiery Warehouse is pretty good. Not it's kind of a cop out, but I like your answer. But my second answer would be interviewing people with a spotlight in the dark. So when you got these three people that have spotlights on them and they're basically being interrogated in chairs in a black room, I know that when I sit down to draw a page like that, I know it's going to be like a half day because you don't have to draw backgrounds.
Yep.
But I think it's really fun to experiment with light and like reflective light. And, how dark do you make the background? How impressionistic can you get? Because you can really play with the ink at that stage.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my second one because I was going to say that opening scene where they're in the interrogation room is really cool. It's almost like a play. Because it's like what is this room at the police office that is like it's a gigantic room, but the only thing in it is a single light.
No, it's a stage.
Yeah,
there are 4 lights.
Yep,
no, there's only one.
Yep. What would you give this episode for a rating?
I think this is a top episode, so I'm going to go with a 5 out of 5.
Yeah, I was on the fence. I think I might give it, I think I'm going to go 4, only because my only real quibble with it is that I wish that they had stuck to the Rashomon point of view thing a little bit more. They kind of dump it pretty quickly. Right. And I'm not exactly sure. It probably changes the episode if you stick with it, and maybe it's asking too much to do to really commit to that for a kids' TV show.
It's for kids, man.
Yeah. Hey, well,
24 minutes. Hey,
they shouldn't have brought it to the table if they weren't going to eat it.
What kind of phrase is that?
I don't know. I just made it up.
Hey, if you're not going to eat it, don't bring it to the table.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I would say it's almost great, but not quite for me. I think the first great one is yet to be seen. I think we kind of know which one it's going to be. But
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you got anything else you want to say about this before we move on?
Yeah, no, man, I'm good.
Cool.
Great episode.
Take a quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, we're back, and next up is The Forgotten. And in it... and in it, Alfred goes on an awesome detective jaunt and doesn't even take his friggin' tuxedo off before he goes out. While investigating the disappearances of Gotham's homeless in an undercover disguise, Bruce Wayne is kidnapped and imprisoned in a chain gang mining camp, suffering from amnesia. That's tough to say. Alfred must thus... Who the fuck wrote this? Alfred must thus track him down, help him escape, and free the rest of the prisoners. That's given him a lot of credit for his actions in this episode, because he doesn't really do a lot. It was directed by Boyd Kirkland and written by Jules Dennis, Richard Miller, and Sean Catherine Derrick.
So
go ahead.
Wait, before we start, I'm going to defend this episode because I know it's not great. But okay. My biggest defense is the best character in this episode is the music.
That's fair. Yeah.
Like the Batman dream sequence is really well done. The Western style Danny Elfman Batman is charming and cool and unique. And whenever I think about this episode, I think about the sound for some reason. Even though I've been watching it as a kid, I always think about like that Western harmonica style. I'm not going to sing it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it definitely does a lot of heavy lifting because the body of this episode doesn't really hold up. On the flip side, for me, I think I've said this before. I think I probably said it on the last episode because this kind of falls in the same category. Whenever I think about this show, or whenever I thought about this show, and specifically the episodes of the show I didn't like, this episode was always the one that I thought of.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's not good, but it's so unique and it stands out that it's like there's a lot of bad episodes that I think that are worse than this.
Yeah.
That don't even stand out. This one at least stands out.
That's true. That's true. That's totally fair. But for me, it was I as I've said before, I just never really liked the ones that had the one-off no-name villains and didn't really have Batman in it. And I mean, because as a kid, I'm watching it, you want to see Batman. Watching this now, I will give it a lot of credit because this is I kind of hinted at this when we were talking about P.O.V. in terms of doing stuff that you wouldn't expect in a kids show. This is a kids show that acknowledges that the homeless exist in a non-comedy format, because usually anytime someone homeless shows up in a cartoon, it's for comedic effect, and B has a story
like in real life.
What's that?
It's just like in real life.
Yeah, exactly. And B has a story that revolves around the abduction and abuse of said homeless people.
Oh my God! Yeah.
So that's pretty ballsy and fairly progressive for a kids cartoon. And I just I think the first like maybe 10 minutes or so I really like. I think it's pretty good. It's it doesn't start with a bang, but the story is kind of interesting. But then once the amnesia thing kicks in, it's just I don't know. It doesn't really hang for me.
Yeah. I like the beginning when the person who's running the homeless shelter says to Bruce, people who are homeless are disappearing. no one seems to care. The police are too busy. Who the hell is going to take time to deal with this?
Mm-hmm.
Cut to Batman dealing with this.
Yes.
And I really think that that's a strong case for why he does things the cops can't or don't want to do. Because I think it's really grounding to have Bruce care about these people. And there's even a great scene when he's having one of his dream sequences where Bruce goes in and there's a homeless guy, so he gives him some money, and then there's another one, so he gives her some money, and then there's more and more and more, and he just feels so overwhelmed he's just so brokenhearted that he's not able to deal with all of these people, and you actually see like a tear in his eye before you cut away. I thought that was a really good scene.
Right. Yeah, I think that is a great moment among a lot of not great moments. And I don't mean that I don't mean that it's bad. It's just like, we talked about it with the first Scarecrow episode about how the dream sequences just feel kind of lazy. Yeah. And I think that using these dream sequences to get to as the catalyst to make him remember he's Batman, just, I don't know, it doesn't really work for me. But that one instance, I think is great. Like I called that out too in my notes. I said that's pretty heady for a kid's show about Bruce Wayne deep down feeling bad that he can't help these people. I mean, Batman taking on the homeless epidemic that's something you can't punch,
Yeah. I feel like the stuff that makes this episode bad is stuff that I'm very willing to forgive.
That's fair.
So, in the 90s, you always have the amnesia episode of any series. And I can get past it. I'm sure Highlander has an amnesia episode. You would know.
At least one.
At least one. But, I think Star Trek Next Generation has...
Oh, I'm sure.
Like
I'm sure they do. Yeah. I'm sure they have I'm sure there's one every season in Star Trek.
Oh, wait, no. The whole crew doesn't remember who they are, and Worf just takes command because he's got a Girl Scout sash. Remember?
I don't. But I must not have watched that one.
It's not bad, but I feel like that was just kind of a thing that people did, or like episodes that are like when Homer Simpson has amnesia, has a coma, and it's just a bunch of flashbacks to previous episodes, so the animators can save time. Right. It was just kind of a thing.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying it was good, but I get that it was just a style.
So my response to that would be that usually when they do that, that sort of device is a great way to invert the character and have them act in a way that is contrary to the way they usually act. And then also, they usually learn something about themselves coming out the other end.
Right.
And I don't feel like that happens here. I feel like he just kind of remembers that he's Batman and then kind of kicks his way out of the place.
Yeah, no, he remembers that gray hair is not his thing.
Yeah.
He doesn't belong in Metal Box. Also, I'm looking forward to your book, Highlander Amnesia. I think it's going to be a real hit.
Yeah. That would be pretty interesting, actually. I mean, if you forgot that you were an immortal, and then all of a sudden you just had these people trying to cut your head off, and then you can't.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
all right. Oh shit! I guess you need to Jason Bourne it. Like, people are attacking him. He realizes he's got a sword.
Oh,
he kicks.
Yeah.
He suddenly rips open 3 people and takes their heads off, and he's like, "All right, well, I guess that's finished."
Yeah.
And suddenly there's all these electrical fires around him, and he's like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, that'll be fun.
And afterwards, he's got all these memories of these people's families, and he's slightly better at sword fighting or whatever.
That would be good. Write it down.
Yeah.
Write it up. We'll pitch it. Yeah, it's I just don't think it's such a meaty premise. To have Bruce Wayne, who's this super rich guy, you're literally putting him in the shoes of a homeless person, but not in a way that would really affect him as Bruce Wayne, the rich guy, because it's not.
Right.
And I mean, obviously, again, it's a kid's show. It's a Batman show. There's got to be a bad guy. There's got to be punching and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I feel like the premise is so meaty, and then they just kind of supplement it with dream sequences and Alfred not knowing how to fly the bat plane. And a kind of
the bat plane's like, you want me to land? Okay, your funeral.
Yeah.
Like, who programmed the bat plane for humor, gallows humor at that?
Yeah, was Bruce like, one day Alfred's gonna want to fly this, and I'm gonna make sure that he knows that I don't want him to do it. And I think he's bad at it.
When the plane says your funeral, should it be a funny your funeral or dark your funeral? I can imagine Bruce staying up very late, making sure it's the right type.
Yeah,
of tone in the voice.
I feel like if you get in a plane and it says your funeral, I hope you kept the receipt because you should probably take it back to the plane store.
The plane store. Oh man.
Speaking of going to the plane store, not really.
Yeah.
The end of this episode's kind of weird too, where everybody's saved, and then Bruce is like at the home of one of the guys who he was in there with, and he's walking out, and they're like, "Yeah, what are you gonna do?" And he's like, "I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna get into my Rolls Royce and go back to my giant mansion. Call me if you think you might want a job." He doesn't offer them a job. He says, "Call me if you want a job." Yeah,
and you assume that he hooks them up after, but yeah, he wakes up from this nightmare and has a butler and a Rolls Royce. He's like, "See you later."
Right, like it's like a cute little coda, but I mean, inside the story that they're trying to present, or like should have maybe tried to present, it's kind of a dicky way to end it.
Yeah. You know, it's funny if they had done some kind of follow up to those characters, like if even if they were a cameo in a future episode where one of the guys was like working security or working in Wayne Labs, whatever.
Yeah,
I feel like that would be a nice kind of nod to Bruce trying to help people outside of Batman, you know?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I was thinking as I was watching it, I was like, oh man, Sean should use these guys in his book.
Do they, what are their names? There's the big black dude and the white dude.
Yeah, they definitely have names and they definitely say them, but I don't remember what they are.
Yeah. No, I'll find a place for them. I'm maybe starting another sequel to a Batman thing, but we'll see.
The villain in this is another one where it's just a very kind of forgettable one shot.
Yeah.
And I know Bruce Timm actually commented on the how difficult it is to do the one-time villains. So he specifically tried to make him over the top and, you know, really fat and eating food just as a way to kind of stand out.
Right.
And it is interesting to watch this back to back with P.O.V. because, you know, as we said, P.O.V. has it's a very faceless villain, but the villain isn't the central part of the story. Not that he really is in this episode either. But the faceless villain is more interesting.
Yeah, like you said, the last episode, the faceless villain was really interesting, but this guy is a comedy relief. I mean, this just giant overweight guy who can't stop eating. Shouting orders to people between ham sandwiches. It makes you. It definitely takes away the severity of the situation, but it's kind of a ridiculous situation anyway. I feel like this episode is trying to be Cool Hand Luke or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like in theory, you can see why the theme and the visuals would work, but the logistics of it actually happening. Like, where is there a desert outside of Gotham City?
Yeah.
Like how? I mean, there's so many questions I have.
Gotham City in this show is basically like Springfield in The Simpsons, where it's
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, one direction it's the winter and it's mountains, and the other direction is a desert and there's jungle. It's whatever you need is just outside Evergreen Terrace.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess I'm okay with that, but I don't know.
Yeah,
it's funny.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it's tough with these episodes because, you know, not every episode can be Heart of Ice, you know.
Right.
And I think that there is a good episode in here. I just don't think they fully cooked it. And you can tell this is one of those episodes, as we were talking about P.O.V., where they didn't put the best guys on the animation for this. Like it's clearly not as good as P.O.V. That fight scene in the alleyway is just like, it's so slow. It's so slowly animated. It's kind of fun with him, you know, dodging the punches without taking his hands out of his pockets. But it's just not executed super well. And you know, it shows.
It's funny. I mean, the idea of working on a team to create something like a cartoon like this, to know that you're phoning in certain episodes. I mean, there must be a discussion. So you go into a meeting with Bruce Timm and Paul Dini and all these guys, and they talk about P.O.V. And you were in that meeting talking about Rashomon and this amazing animation and how great this, like all that stuff. And you leave feeling like, this is why I got into animation. This is awesome. And then the next meeting is about Forgotten. And at that meeting, does everybody go, well, we kind of blew our load on P.O.V, so who really cares about this one? Like to let something go to print or to go to animation that it's kind of meh. Oh, well, who cares? Like, I don't know what that feeling is, because like everything I've ever written is as good as I can make it, and I stand by it. But and I understand the production of animation and movies. Sometimes you need to compromise, just move on.
Right.
Right. I'm not sure where that line is.
Yeah, it's it would be really interesting to be inside those rooms, like we said. It's like who's the person that makes the decision that this one's like, we could probably phone it in for this one.
I know. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's. I would like to point out that the bad guys in this might be the dumbest bad guys in the history of Batman, because their big idea to fight Batman is to draw him into a dark mine and then turn on all of their headlamps.
Yeah, Batman's never thought about darkness and shadows before.
Yeah, it's probably the exact opposite of what you would want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we more or less covered this. I don't think there's a lot more to say unless you can think of anything else. Do you have a scene that you would want to draw?
Ooh. I mean, if I was going to do some really heartfelt illustrations, I might do Batman with the homeless.
Yeah.
Like him in a soup kitchen, or I think that stuff it would be really great as a one-page spread. I mean, you would never sell that spread, but I think that it's a real emotional beat that you don't see a lot of in comics. So I might be interested in drawing that, even though it's not like the glamorous scenes, or that or Alfred landing on the plane.
Yeah.
How about you?
I'm going to say something equally as heartfelt and touching, and I would say I would draw the cave fight sequence. Because that would just
that's very heartfelt.
Yeah. No, I think that would just be a lot of fun. It's playing with all the shadows and stuff, and the actual physics of the fight and everything. You could do some really cool stuff, I think, in there would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's funny, being on the right book that allows you to do shadows, it really does give you a whole lot of opportunity as artists, Yeah. And that's kind of our take with this podcast, is how do comic artists view this stuff, So I feel like shadows and reflective light and all that stuff, even though maybe a lot of people listening don't know what those things are as much, but I do think about that stuff a lot, And if you had to draw this in a comic, how detailed would you start going? How much crosshatch would you use? How dark would you go?
Right. Yeah. I am constantly struggling with that. Like the things that I'm working on, when I get a page where it's, nighttime in a that requires a lot of shadows, I can just really kind of turn it up to 11, and it just feels really natural to do that stuff. And then on the flip side, if I have something that takes place, outside during the day, I kind of freeze up a little bit, because I'm like, well, I don't want to make this exterior daytime shot look like it's the Twilight Zone here.
Yeah.
So it is something that's difficult. How do you generally handle that stuff?
It's funny. I was thinking at that time, you had that tablet, and we set it to all black, and we drew in white.
Yep.
And we're trying to figure out, like, if you start with complete black and you only draw the highlights, no matter what you draw, you're probably guaranteed to get the most amount of black per page possible.
Right.
And we found it really hard to draw with white, And in theory, because I know J.P. Leon did a story in Batman Black and White Volume 3, where I think he did subtractive inking, or I don't know what you would call it. But he started out with black, and he only added white, and, it must have been a pain in the ass, but it was a really interesting experiment, And I think that even if you're trying to be really black heavy, you can always go further, because you fall in love with little white shapes that you create, and you don't want to black over everything.
Right,
you know what I mean? But that's where, artists like Zaffino are so amazing, is like the bold decision making that they make is incredible. Like, I would buy a page of J.P. Leon. I know I'm talking about different artists here. JP's stuff, and what I thought was a picture of a guy's face half in shadow. I could tell he drew the lips, he drew the cheeks, he drew the nose, he drew the nostrils. And then after it dried, he must have gone black and gone, no, it should all be black.
Yep.
So you can see his thought process with the ink. And if you're an inker, you sort of know how to dissect the history of each panel like that, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, there's a famous story by Alex Toth that's about these Romans, and the twist of the story is the last page. You find out that these are the Romans who were at the crucifixion.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah, it's really great. And the last page is this big splash page of the 3 crosses, like giant 3 crosses, right? And they're all blacked out. And I forget where I heard this, but apparently on the actual original art, you can see that he actually drew out all of the figures on the crosses, and then at some point decided, nope, it's going to be more impactful if I black it out. So he drew everything out and then blacked it out into silhouette, which is, and it's always, you know what? I love doing that. It's more work. It kind of feel when I end up doing stuff like that, it kind of feels a little bit like I'm being indecisive, you know?
Right.
But
right.
When you get to that point where you make that decision to black it out and it works, it's so satisfying.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting because in theory, slapping down black shapes should be quick and easy, but the process of doing it takes a lot of bravery.
Right.
Sometimes, like you've focused on a woman's elbow drawing her elbow for like 3 hours, and then in the end you realize design-wise it's better if you just black it out. So you just slap black over it, and it's really hard because you're going from minimalism and impressionism. But you don't want it to feel lazy because, adding a lot of black can feel lazy sometimes. So, yeah, it's always like it's not an easy thing to do, and it's easier than it looks,
Yeah. You mean it's harder than it looks?
Sorry, yeah. I think this glass of wine is getting to me.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's a lot harder than it looks because in theory it should be easy, but the turmoil that goes through the artist's head before deciding, you know what, fuck it, this is just going to be black. That's not an easy step to get to all the time.
Right. Yeah. I know I struggle with backgrounds a lot too in some places because, I want to be like, well, I feel like I could black this wall out, but I don't know if that makes sense given if it's not like, it doesn't call for that mood. So it's an interesting thing to have to, constantly push back and forth with.
Yeah. I was doing Chrononauts with Mark Millar, and my work is heavily based on heavy blacks and stuff. And halfway through the book, I realized, and I knew this, but it never occurred to me to change drawing styles, was I realized this is a comedy. Like, putting shadowy, scary faces on everybody, like Hellblazer or Batman, like, I don't think that's working here. So you can see halfway through the book, I tone it down, and I get slightly more Tothy and cartoony, and I ease up on fingerprints everywhere. Mm-hmm. It doesn't need to look, stressed and strangled everywhere. But yeah, I mean, there's a place for it. I love books that are horror books or mysteries or stuff that takes place in dark alleys is totally up your style as well, I'm guessing. Right. But if you give me a book in bright daylight, I'm like, oh, God, I have to draw everything? Jesus Christ. I fucking hate the sun because you can see everything around you and I have to draw it.
Yeah, one of the last books that I did called Poser, which is great. It was so much fun to do, but it was such a back and forth because like half of it took place outside in California during the day, and then the other half of it was like in clubs at night and was like a slasher story. So there would be these outside shots where, again, I would be like, I feel like I can't really put much shadow in here at all, so I feel kind of timid. And then the nighttime stuff, I'm like, oh, it's just splatter, and maybe you don't see this guy's face at all. It was interesting going back and forth between those two things.
Yeah. Do you ever ink someone's face in shadow and think, oh, I fucked it up, it's too far? So you take a lunch break, or maybe you put it aside for a day, and you come back the next day and you go, actually, I think it works.
Oh, yeah.
Do you ever have that?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, it's weird to get to that step away and come back and realize that, oh, actually, I nailed it, but I hated myself so much yesterday that I wasn't able to appreciate this.
Yeah, that's basically my everyday when I work.
How much do I hate myself today?
Anyway, what would you rate this episode?
I'm going to go... If 3 is average, I'm going to go 2.5 out of 3 out of 5. Sorry.
Yeah.
How about you?
I would give it a 2. I think I like it a little bit more than I have in the past. Now that I've kind of, I can recognize some of the heavy stuff that they were putting in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just feel like it. It was a little underbaked, and it didn't have it didn't have the full backing of the A team. I don't think. So unfortunately, it's not what it could be. But who knows? Maybe sometime down the line, someone can come back to the concept and do something cool with it.
Yeah. Honestly, I think it was you I was talking to about, or it was our text, all our friends on text messages. We were saying how cool it would be to commission artists to do every episode of Batman the Animated Series as a one-shot.
Oh, yeah.
And let them interpret it their way, but basically stick to the dialogue, stick to the script,
Yeah, that would be very cool.
This would be a fun one to draw, but I'm not sure they stick the landing.
Yeah, I think this one would require some script rework. But that's a story for another time. Yeah, anyway, that was Forgotten and P.O.V, or P.O.V and Forgotten if you're not listening to this backwards. And so next episode we'll be covering Be a Clown and It's Never Too Late. It's a little bit out of order because we wanted to make sure we had Two-Face Part 1 and Part 2 as a single episode. So we're going to kind of jump around a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Love that episode.
But yeah, thanks so much for listening. If you like the show, please give us a rating and review on iTunes. And you can find us on Twitter at BATTASS Podcast. That's at BATTASS Podcast. And if you've got any questions or feedback, you can find us there or send us an email at, battasspodcast@gmail.com. I hope that's right. I haven't looked it up in a while. So anyway.
I'm sure they can check out any other episode where you have the correct information.
Yeah, I'm sure it's all over the place, yeah. But yeah, thanks, Sean. And
thanks, Clay.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next time.